The year was 2011, and I was a freshman in high school. And I stood confidently and boldly outside of the doors of my high school cafeteria, knowing that I was about to make one of the biggest decisions of my entire life. I was about to decide who I was going to sit with. And that's a big decision because whoever I decided to sit with, that was either going to be an on-ramp to my social escapades of my high school career, or it was going to be the absolute downfall of the reputation of my name in the mouths of my peers. And you see, eating meals with people has pretty much always been a big deal, whether that was in Bible times or now. Whoever you eat with, you humanize. Whoever you eat with, you give dignity to them. You are associating yourself with them in an intimate way. And the text that we're looking at for today didn't exactly take place in a high school cafeteria, but the setting that it's in kind of reminds me of a high school cafeteria a little bit. We are in Galatians chapter 2. And so Paul wrote the book of Galatians to the churches in Galatia because the Christians in Galatia were being tempted by some Jewish leaders to undergo circumcision. But the people in Galatia knew that they didn't have to be circumcised, but that they were saved by the cross of Jesus Christ. But they were forgetting and they needed a little bit of a reminder. So Paul wrote this letter to them. And so in chapter 2, just to kind of paint a picture for you of what the stage looks like, Paul is writing to Peter. So Peter is sitting down and he's in something that I would imagine a high school cafeteria to look like. Maybe not exactly the exact features, but he's sitting down and he's eating with a bunch of Gentiles. And so Peter eating with the Gentiles, and they're just chilling, having fun, and Peter is humanizing these people. But something that's interesting about Peter is that Peter was a Jew, and Jews didn't associate with Gentiles, who are all the people that he was eating with. And while they're eating, a bunch of Jewish leaders come into the room, and they see Peter sitting there eating with these Gentiles. And Peter quickly gets up, and I'm sure that as he stood up, he got some dust on the people he was eating with, and dust probably didn't just get in their mouths and leave a bad taste, but it probably left a pretty bad taste in their souls as well. You see, Peter thought that he needed to be justified by who he was associated with and what he did. Peter, a Jew who was basically the jock of the high school cafeteria, would never be associated with the Gentiles, who were probably the kids that were picked last in gym class, and they probably wore Crocs and those gauchos that we all thought were fashionable at one point or another in our life. You see, Peter thought he was justified by what he did, and Paul rebukes him. And it's a pretty stern rebuke, and we're going to pick up looking at that in Galatians chapter 2, verse 19. Paul says this: "For through the law I died to the law, so that I might live for God. I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God, who loved me and gave himself for me. I do not set aside the grace of God, for if righteousness could be gained through the law, Christ died for nothing." You see, Peter didn't get it, and Paul just had to remind him and bring him back. And sometimes me and you need that reminder too. We think we need to do this and we need to do that. We need to be involved in this youth group and that activity. But the truth is that we are saved by Christ. We have been crucified with him. And our old self died, and we are raised to new life with him. New life with Christ. So, the gospel breaks all boundaries. It breaks all barriers. We are justified by Jesus. And the gospel builds bridges. The gospel builds bridges in that high school cafeteria between social groups, builds bridges at work. So I would just encourage you guys, go out and share the gospel with people, because you have been crucified with Christ. You are justified not by what you have done, but you are justified because